One of my live stream lectures this evening, and before I get started, I want to just take a moment to thank all of my supporters and everyone for supporting my channel. My channel truly would not be where it's at today without all of my supporters. So with that being said, let's get on down to today's lecture, which is I'm going to do a breakdown analysis of thinking distortions. I'm going to do a breakdown analysis of what thinking distortions are. I was in a conversation today with several people in the real world, in the natural environment, and everybody just, talking about various different topics in terms of how the day was, or how the week's been going, or how the year's been going. So, the audience is aware, I've been fully retired over 2 years now, retired from state government as a licensed clinical addiction therapist. I still maintain all of my credentials. So, even as a therapist, we have to do a lot of listening. So in this conversation that took place in the natural environment, it's probably about maybe 6 of us there. I probably just sat there, drinking my coffee, probably for about a good hour just listening. And once I listened to everybody conversing, I basically shared with them some powerful information in regards to many groups I've done as a licensed therapist throughout my 17 years working as an addiction expert. And I shared in the group to them, I said, I have heard a lot of things, and I'm going to educate you all, since I've been listening for a whole hour, on thinking distortions, thought distortions. And because everybody in the world uses thinking distortions, and for real. And I shared with the group, and I said there are different categories of thinking distortions. And one of those categories of thinking distortions that people use throughout life in the field, in the clinical world, is what we call extreme thinking. A person who using extreme thinking, they're going to have their all or nothing thinking. It's either one way or the other. All or nothing. This is going to have to be it or nothing. And that's a good description of extreme thinking, which falls under the category of thinking distortions. When people have these thinking distortions going on, they view the world in a negative, pessimistic, negative light. And they view the world, they view people, they view situations in a negative sense, because they are viewing the world through distorted lenses, through distorted thinking. Another category of thinking distortions that I heard within that group that I was sitting in for well over an hour just listening to these people is overgeneralization. And a good description of overgeneralization is always or never thinking. The world is going to always be negative. The world is, people are going to always commit crime, or I'm going to always continue to use alcohol or drugs. So that's overgeneralization is another example of thought distortions, thinking distortions. And I shared with that group in that natural environment engagement is personalization. Personalization is another thinking distortion, which is individuals who personalize everything. They are making everything about them. A real good example of that, just imagine for a moment if a friend, a family member came to you and they're talking to you about, what's going on in their life, or what they're up against, whether it's medical problems, or financial problems, or relationship problems, or job problems. A person who has the thinking distortion of personalization, they're going to flip that conversation and put the focus all on them. And I heard that going on in that dialogue in the natural environment from the members in that group. So personalization, person, no matter who they're talking to or what's going on with the other person, they're going to flip that conversation. They're going to put the focus back on them. It's all about me, and that's a clear description of personalization that falls under the category of thinking distortions. And then we have, and actually, to be honest with you, that group that I was in the world, because I still maintain my clinical license, I still make a significant amount of money under my professional credentials in my home office. That group, because I literally have lecture on thinking distortions in the real world, people. So that group of people literally got powerful information from a licensed clinical addiction expert on top of my game. I work shoulder to shoulder with world-renowned experts in the field of addiction. Another example of thinking distortions is magnification and minimization. I heard that going on in that discussion. And what magnification and minimization is making, when a person is making something seem greater or smaller than what it really is. You know, a real good example of magnification, a person can thump their toe. And when they thump their toe, they're going to say, oh my God, I got to go to the emergency room. I'm probably going to have to get my toe cut off and go on disability. That's a good example of how they magnify the situation, or they can minimize it. You know, a good example of minimization is a person may have had 30 speeding tickets in 1 month. And they're going to say to themselves, oh, they ain't going to even worry about it. I ain't even worry about going to jail. You know, I've had 29 other prior speeding tickets. That's a good example of minimization. So magnification and minimization falls under the umbrella, under the category of thought distortions, thinking distortions. And then the most common one that I heard in that group today that I was just listening and observing for well over an hour, should have gave all of them a doggone my invoice. Jumping to conclusions. People who are jumping to conclusions, they are immediately assuming something without getting all of the facts, without knowing all of the information. They're going to immediately jump to conclusions. They may even hear part of the information and they're going to already jump to conclusions. So-and-so is wrong. That person was wrong without even getting all of the information, but that person wrong. Real talk. So jumping to conclusions is another layer, another label, another component of thinking distortions. And then we got selective focus is another category of thinking distortions. Selective focus. And I'm telling you, we all use thinking distortions. Everybody in this world, throughout their day or their week or their month, we all use thinking distortions because we all got to think. And then we have selective focus. Selective focus is basically looking at only one small piece of what happened, and you're going to ignore everything else in regards to that situation. That's a clear description of selective focus. It's almost like having tunnel vision or narrow vision. Selective focus. You know, it can be a bomb and have exploded. A 9/11, when that occurred, a person who using selective focus, they're only going to focus on one small thing at a time, such as, well, even though this bomb went off over here, you know, I got to just go to work. I just got to just go to work. It don't matter if everything is falling apart all around me. I'm just going to go to work no matter what. That's a good example of selective focus. And then we have concrete thinking. I heard dialogue going back and forth in that group that I was sat in and just listening to everybody. It was one particular person in there who had concrete thinking. Concrete thinking is mainly the person is doggone stubborn. Stubborn as a mule. The thinking is concrete. They know what's right. You can't tell them nothing else. Concrete thinking falls also under the category of thinking distortions, where you're viewing life, people, and experiences through distorted lenses and through distorted thinking. And then we have, which is, pay attention to this one, because I had many of the individuals ask me to give them clarity on actor versus observer. Is another category of thinking distortions. Actor versus observer means we think we are at fault. We think we are never at fault or responsible for our behavior. We are never at fault for anything that we've done. Our behavior, rather it's criminal, rather you know it's wrong. A person who is an actor versus observer, think they are never at fault or responsible for their behavior. I heard one of the individuals talking in that group said that within 1 year they were fired from 7 jobs. And as I was listening to this person, they was putting all of the blame on co-workers, putting some of the blame on supervisors, putting some of the blame on management, put the blame on the spouse into regards to why they were fired 7 times in a short time frame, people. That's a clear description of actor versus observer, which is one of the layers of thinking distortions. And then we have closed thinking. Closed thinking is pretty much no one in this world can tell us differently about anything, about any situation. The thinking is closed. Can't nobody on the planet tell this person anything differently. And that's a good example of closed thinking. And then we have emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is another layer of thinking distortions. And emotional reasoning is an individual is making a conclusion based on their feelings, based on their emotions. Rather, they're sad, angry, enraged, irritated. So when they're in that emotional state, then they're going to make decisions when they're in that emotional state, which ties into distorting their thinking because they're in that emotional state. So emotional reasoning is making a conclusion on a situation based on your feelings versus factual and observable information. And that is a clear description of thinking distortions. So ladies and gentlemen, those are all of the layers of thinking distortions. We got that extreme thinking, overgeneralization, personalization, magnification, minimization, jumping to conclusions, selected focus, concrete thinking, actor versus observer, closed thinking, and emotional reasoning. Those are all of the various of components of thinking distortions when the individual got that thought distortions going on, when they view life, people, and experience from distorted, which has a direct impact on making them making very bad decisions and getting them into a lot of trouble. This is real. We all use thinking distortions throughout our day and our life, but the problem is many people are not aware that they're doing this because we're dealing with the mind. We're dealing with the thinking distortions. So that's one of the most powerful things. You got to raise awareness of these various different types of thought distortions and come up with a game plan in regards to what are some specific positive things you're going to do in relation to the thought distortions that you are utilizing. So again, this is powerful information. If you are listening to this information, you need to hype this video. Many people really need to know about the various type of thought distortions that are going on. You may be one of them who are using many of these various types of thought distortions that's going on, that's going to drive negative behavior. Real talk. So that's all I have. Simplify, simple fidelity. Oh, most importantly, I want to thank all my viewers who are chiming in, listening to this lecture. One of my styles and one of my approaches, I do want to acknowledge my viewers for chiming in on this live lecture, but my style is I'm not going to go back and forth, responding in the comment area, and the reason why that slows me down on my deliverance. But I do want to acknowledge my viewers, because my thing is, my style is when I come in front of these cameras, I come here to get down to business, to share my knowledge, my skills and experience onto the world. This information can be very useful to help a person make a positive behavior change. I do, want to acknowledge and thank all my viewers, but at the same time, my style is I don't go back and forth, because that would have happened, a 15 or 20-minute lecture would turn into an hour or 2-hour lecture when that's cutting away into my downtime, because I believe in maintaining that balance. Because when I finish this lecture, which I am in a hot minute, I will deplug from this camera and move on with the rest of my evening without the cameras following me or without the cameras rolling. So again, I want to thank everyone. Hype this video. Share this video. Many people are not aware of these various types of thought distortions, thinking distortions that we all use, but if you're not aware of it, it can have a negative impact on outcome, and I'm here to tell you. That's all I have. Simplify, simple fidelity, that I'm going to leave you in the care of your own conscience. Have a great day.